Trump dismantles the Department of Education. Lutnick gives a mostly true history of tariffs and income tax that we're going to be fact-checking. The world gets introduced to mortgage-backed burritos. Village Roadshow files for bankruptcy as Legacy Hollywood continues its death throes. Pokemon Mania has people stampeding in stores, and Alec Baldwin dies inside on the red carpet. Drew, this administration is running around the world, DC specifically, with a chainsaw. And even though they promised to do it, it is still a trip to watch it actually happen.
It is official. He signed the executive order. The Department of Education is going bye-bye to the legal extent that he has. Now, since this is a Congress branch of government that they started, they have to officially vote to get it completely struck off the record, but he's using everything he can in his executive orders to strip it down, get it as lean and mean as possible. So we shall see. What's your initial reaction of the dismantling of the Department of Education?
You have to do something dramatic. So this is one where I get the emotional response at the level of a headline, makes a lot of sense. But when you actually look at what's been going on, this is not about dismantling it, is about protecting our kids and making sure that they get educated. The Department of Education itself has not functionally been the thing that protected our kids. So look at the rate of spending. These are all inflation adjusted dollars. The Department of Education came into existence in 1979. It officially went into action in 1980. In 1980, these are inflation adjusted dollars. We were spending $7,429 per student. Flash forward to 2021, we're spending almost double that at $13,820, and we have not moved the educational achievement of the students basically at all. We're not even at the top. It's not like we've had to pay an increasing amount to stay at the top. We've been in the middle of the pack to low in the pack, depending on which thing you're looking at, which aspect, whether it's science, reading, math. So our outcomes are blah at best, and the expenditure is going up, 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 up. We also spend more per student than any other developed nation for worse results. So this is one where you should judge a tree by the fruit that it bears, and this is a tree that simply refuses to bear fruit. So you have to make a change. Now, just abolishing or reducing it as much as you legally can, the Department of Education, does not instantly mean that education is going to be good for kids. And so people are going to have to ferociously look at what do we do next? Not just what do we stop doing, but what do we do next? That's going to be the real question.
What about the teacher salaries? What about the actual impact that it's going to have at that level? So I know from a Doge level, we want to slash the deficit. We need to save money. This is a way to save money. But what are those second order consequences that we'll see happening to the rest of the education community?
So this is where I encourage people, whenever you have a hypothesis like, hey, we want to reduce spending on the Department of Education, is there anything that we can look backwards at to see if this is a smart move? We have a graph, we should pull this up, of what has actually happened as you've spent more money. Because you would think that this is the kind of thing that if you threw money at it, if you had more teachers, if you had more qualified teachers, that this is going to lead somewhere good. But the reality is, when you spend your money, what you end up getting is more employees. And unfortunately, this has not been going to making sure that we have smaller and smaller class sizes over time. What this ends up going to is admin. So looking at the graph, on there, you see total cost is skyrocketing. The outcome that we get is virtually flat. And the one thing that goes almost in lockstep with the amount of dollars that you're spending is just the overall staffing, the administrative burden. This is the same thing that we're seeing in higher education. As we spend more and more on higher education, we are not seeing more students getting into these elite universities. What we're seeing is that you're getting this massive administrative bloat. And so the increase in cost is not yielding an increase in ability of student that graduates, whether you're talking about middle school, high school, or secondary education. You're just seeing a bureaucracy that gets bigger and bigger. And this is a big part of the thing that culturally people can feel, which is what they, I think, are groping a little bit in the dark. But Trump resonates with this idea of this thing isn't working. And the reason it isn't working is because what he calls the swamp, but it's really just this bureaucratic nightmare that, from a metaphor perspective, I think of as barnacles on a turtle. If you put too many barnacles on a turtle, it just sinks and drowns. And we're in that territory. And again, I want people to look at the amount of money that we've been spending per student. We have tried, with love in our heart, with a desire to see kids be the future, we've said spare no expense. It doesn't matter that the rest of the world spends less. We are going to keep spending more on this, but it has not worked. And so to look at that and say, this is a money problem is to fundamentally misunderstand all of the data that's pouring out. Like, this is available for anybody to go and look at. And despite our willingness to spend more and more and more to educate our kids, it isn't educating them better. And so we've just got to say, okay, we now need to do something different. And I think something that's really important here that I don't want to get lost is there are going to be a lot of objections, like what do we do with special needs kids? What do we do about kids that are using school for food? Isn't getting rid of the Department of Education going to hamper that stuff? And I think that they've taken care of this. There's a pretty funny sketch that I saw online that covers this. Hit it.
Trump dismantling the Department of Education is going to have horrific implications. So I actually think this is going to be super beneficial for us. But like, what are your concerns? Kids are going to lose access to their breakfast and lunch programs. Yeah, that's huge. The kids have to eat. But thankfully, that's already funded by the Department of Agriculture. Okay, but what about the special needs children? What about the children who need IEPs and special education services? What about them? Super important, and I fully agree with you that we need to protect these children. However, all of that is being moved to the Department of Health and Human Services, so none of that is going away. Okay, whatever, but what about the grants and scholarships? What about the Pell Grants? Where are those going to come from? Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was on a Pell Grant myself, and I understand the importance of having these grants and scholarships available, but thankfully, all of that is being transferred to the Department of Treasury. Whatever, okay? We need more funding, not less. You know, more money is just, it's not always the answer. Interestingly enough, adjusted for inflation even, the Department of Education's budget has grown from $14 billion to $80 billion in recent years, while student outcomes have actually gotten worse. Not just that, but nationwide, less than 32% of our children are proficient in reading and less than 31% are proficient in math. The system is failing our children. It's time for it to go.
Dude, you can't have less than a third that are proficient in reading and math and be competitive on the world stage. And anybody that thinks that you don't need to be competitive on the world stage, that is a luxury belief that you might have been able to get away with when we had stability globally. But that era is rapidly coming to a close, and we are going to be back in the just naked battle for power that ultimately runs the world. And so to be in a situation where China is outperforming us on educational attainment is a very bad place to be, as you are revving up a Cold War that could obviously, I hope it never does, but could spill kinetic. Yeah. So no matter what, even in a time of peace, I think it's grotesque to have less than a third of people be proficient in reading and math. That's nuts to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either. But if I were to toss you the keys and kind of figure out what's the best approach, how should we fix this problem? You're right. We can't just say more money and the results are going to improve. What do you think should be the approach of fixing education in America?
If I were going to really boil it down, this is 30,000 foot. You're going to need to get into the weeds. But at a 30,000 foot view, this is already being played out in charter schools where it's what I call expectations and execution. So you have to have high expectations for the students, high expectations for the teachers. Absolutely no tolerance in a student that isn't giving it their all, especially the way charter schools are now. A lot of them are operating in underserved neighborhoods. So it's like, hey, there's a lot of people that want your spot. And so if you're not taking this seriously because they're doing it on a lottery, if you're not taking your spot seriously, then we're going to bump you for somebody who is. So you can really hold the kids accountable to doing their work, holding themselves accountable to getting good grades, and that you can hire and fire teachers. And this is where, and I know that this is going to be controversial, but from a union perspective, part of the problem, unions can get to the point where they become so powerful that they themselves now become the barnacles, that you're no longer able to hire and fire effectively. So people that aren't good at their jobs, are not yielding results, are protected by the unions. And now, instead of looking at the outcomes or the fruit that the tree is bearing, you're just ignoring that and saying, even though the outcomes here are terrible and we're paying more and more for terrible results, we're just going to let it keep going because people are fighting for the wrong things. So if I'm right that this is expectations and execution, what does execution look like in a world where this is all being pushed down to the state level, the local level? I think that is step number one. What's crazy is If you find yourself arguing for the Department of Education, go back and read their mission statement, which was to ensure that state and local governments, they don't use the word autonomy, but that was the idea, are able to decide locally what's best for their kids. And that just isn't how this is played out. So if we're going to push this down to the state and local level, I think the way to approach this is two-pronged. One, the idea of the federal government giving each student a budget so that the budget follows them. This was an idea you and I were debating on the live. So shout out to you to really showing the benefit. And I'm not even sure that you and I come out in the same place, but you showed me the idea that letting the dollars follow the students overcomes the part that I was stuck on, which is I don't want the government to have to pre-fund a school, because now you get into, do we want them funding religious schools, et cetera, et cetera. So letting the dollars go with the students, letting the parents vote on what school they send their kids to. But because I can see how that can derange itself, I think there has to be some output that school has to have from an educational achievement perspective in order to qualify for students to be able to spend their educational savings account, I think it is ESA, for them to spend those dollars at that school. So schools need to remain in good standing in order for parents to spend money on that school, so that they don't just get good at selling parents, that they actually are good at selling parents based on the fact that they're hitting these educational levels. So again, it's very high level, and there's going to be a lot of stuff in the weeds that are going to need to be worked out by somebody a lot closer to the problem than me, but that's what I'd say at the high level.
Yeah. And I think that there's room for criticism of America's education without it being a condemnation of teachers. My sister's a teacher. I had no teacher. So, we had family in the educational system. So by no means are we saying we need to try something different. That means teachers are evil and they don't deserve a raise. Like, not two things can be true at once. We definitely need to support teachers in the classroom. We need to have smaller class sizes. All those things I think are true. But we also have proof, and the data and the graph shows that the Department of Education, as it is assembled right now, isn't giving us the outcome we want. So we have to do something different.
Agreed. And this is also all happening at a time where if I were sending my kid to a school, I would absolutely insist that AI be integrated deeply into what's happening. I think AI is going to be far better at explaining a lot of this stuff. It's going to be far more knowledgeable. And it's going to be far better at recognizing the patterns in like what's working and actually yielding outcomes. Now, one thing you and I were talking about a lot in the live that I think is a really good, quick barometer for whether your educational system is moving in the right direction or not. Do wealthy people who can afford to send their kid anywhere they want, do they want to use the public system? If the answer is yes, if they're like, oh, cool, I've got the dollars and I know that this school that's local to me is absolutely doing a bang up job of delivering these incredible results. So yeah, I'm going to send my kid to that public school. If wealthy people who could send their kids anywhere decide to leave them in the system, you're building a good system. If wealthy people are like, hell no, and they run in the opposite direction, they're like, yo, I'm sending my kids anywhere, but I will build my own school if I have to. That tells you that there's something wrong with that system. And that's exactly where we are now.
Nice. Jumping into DC and economic news, the All In podcast went to DC and they sat down with Howard Lutnick, our new Secretary of Commerce, and they talked about a couple things, but we want to start at the top, which is the history of U.S. and tariffs.
Yeah. So first of all, shout out to the All In podcast, Chamath and David Freeberg. David, who was on the show. David, I love you. Amazing. The All In podcast is killing it. Like, these guys are very impressive.
Yeah.
And getting some of the strongest business leaders in the world to do a podcast, it's a pretty extraordinary time.
And getting them on a cabinet as well, because Dave Sachs is now leaving.
Facts.
Definitely have reach. But yeah, I wanted to start off with tariffs because I know that's been hot in the news right now.
America was built on tariffs with no income tax. No income tax till 1913.
Okay, pause.
None.
That isn't true. Now, he's going to boil things down in this explanation to get people to understand where all this is going. But I am going to punctuate this with the actual timeline. So from 1789 to 1860, Early federal taxes were tariffs and excises for sure. But in 1861 to 1865, because of the Civil War, that's when we had our first federal income tax. So it isn't true that it didn't kick in until 1913, but it was temporary. But something that either he doesn't know or he is intentionally leaving out is that there was a growing groundswell for a long time before 1913 of people saying, you've got to start taxing people. Of course, in the beginning, they wanted it to just be a tax on the rich. And as we go through his explanation, I'll hit the beats of when that groundswell became strong enough that we started taxing the wealthy. Taxing not just the wealthy, but everybody. So we'll get to that. But a lot of this stuff is pushed forward by war. So not 1913, because he's about to say that it was really World War I that drove it. It was the Civil War was the first time.
Greatest, richest country in the world. So when Donald Trump says, make America great again, what he's talking about is from 1880 to 1913, when the country had so much money that we had blue ribbon commissions, which you guys would have been on, right? To try to figure out how to spend the money, right? And no income tax. Then we put in the income tax in 1913. Why? Because we're entering World War I. Yeah. And don't we all need to contribute to protect democracy and protect our way?
Just to punctuate one thing really fast, from 1894 to 1895, we did have an income tax revival. But then the Supreme Court rejected it, basically saying in the beginning, the Supreme Court said you can't charge income tax. And so it's not till later that they're like, okay, actually you can. It had to do with proportion of population by state. And that got struck down. So you had the income tax again, it gets rejected. Anyway, it's going to rear its ugly head again, but let him keep going.
Way of life, right? Then what happens is the world goes into chaos. We come out of chaos, right? And then we're starting to think of, well, what do we do? What do we do? And then 1929, the stock market crashes, right? 1933, we start to say, oh God, we forgot. We need to do tariffs.
The U.S. did not forget about tariffs. The reality is that there's a lot of debate going on. You get, in 1909, you get the first corporate tax is introduced. People propose the 16th Amendment. So ultimately, the 16th Amendment is the thing that allows for modern income tax. And that's when the Supreme Court goes, actually, okay, you can do this. So to divorce this all from like a growing sentiment in the US population that we should be charging an income tax is inaccurate at best and insincere at worst. Now, keep in mind, I loved this interview. And despite some of the inaccuracies of what he says, I think there's a lot directionally to take away from this. But I want to be arguing on terra firma of like, this is actually what happened. And now that we know what happened and we know that people were pushing for this and we know that there was a constitutional amendment, this is the lay of the land. This is where we're at now. What do we want? And because there are going to be several times in the history as we go on here where tax gets insane. So when people are talking about like, there have been times where we've taxed the wealthy in a progressive tax system, but where we're taxing like, I think 96% at one point. So all of that is real. And so looking at the beats of when did we do what was the effect of it, I think is very worthwhile to figure out what's going to be the best America for the average American. Now, I think as they lay it out, they've got a pretty strong case to be made that if we can balance the budget and get to the point where we're making sure that the low and middle-class people aren't paying tax, like that would be fucking huge. So he goes into great detail on that later. But again, to make sure that we're on terra firma, hit these beats.
1933, how can you do tariffs when the markets crash, the world's going into depression, and you're going to do tariffs in 1933? You can't charge the rest of the world money unless the rest of the world's okay.
That's right.
So it was too little, too late, right? So then we come out of World War II. It's 1945. We need to rebuild the world. Okay, so we decide we're going to take our tariffs down. And we'll let them, here's the key, we'll let them have tariffs be up. And we will export the power of our economy to let them rebuild. And we'll let them rebuild. And that's what happens. So 1945, we have the Marshall Plan, right? And we do it in Japan, of course, because they need to be rebuilt. What's the difference, right? So they need to be rebuilt. And then what happens? We have the 50s, and we have the Korean War. So we let them rebuild, which means low tariffs here, high tariffs there. Low tariffs here, high tariffs there. Then we have the Vietnam War, right? So now all of a sudden we have all of Southeast Asia. Low tariffs here, high tariffs there. You know what the best example I can give you to make it crystal clear? Kuwait. We spend almost $100 billion freeing Kuwait, right? You know who has the highest tariffs against the United States of America? The number one country with the highest tariffs against the United States of America. Kuwait. And you think, what? That's insane. But here's what it is. If you go back to this understanding the way America thinks, you need to be rebuilt. You were just destroyed, right? All their oils were, you remember Red, the guy's name was Red something, and he was the guy who capped there were fires in all the oil wells, and he capped them all, and it was amazing. So we let them put up high tariffs. But you know what the problem is? Then we forget.
Right.
And we let it go.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump comes in and says, it's got to stop.
We'll be back to the show in just a moment, but first, let's talk about what makes a truly unforgettable meal. Most people think amazing meat is something you only get on special occasions, but with ButcherBox, you can turn Tuesday night dinners into experiences worth looking forward to. Take it from someone who's been a ButcherBox customer for years, the taste is undeniable. This isn't just meat. This is 100% grass-fed beef, free-range organic chicken, and wild-caught seafood that makes every meal worth looking forward to. My freezer is literally jam-packed because ButcherBox delivers directly to my door. And here's an offer that's going to change your dinner table forever. Sign up for ButcherBox today at butcherbox.com/impact and use code IMPACT at checkout to get your choice of bone-in chicken thighs, grass-fed ground beef, or steak tips in every box, free for an entire year. Again, that's butcherbox.com/impact. Use code IMPACT at checkout. And now let's get back to the show. So walking through some of the different beats here. So he glosses over what happens during the world wars. That plays out a little bit differently than the picture that he paints. So it goes something like this. 1920s, post-World War I, tax cuts known as the Mellon Plan. The US government moved to reduce the very high wartime taxes. I mean, we were throwing them up into the skies. The top individual income tax rate fell from 77% at the war's peak. Jeez. So at the war's peak, we're like, yo, everybody's going to contribute to this. And there was this real sense of patriotism, that paying your taxes, and I would say maybe even more so in World War II, there's a sense of like, it's our duty to pay these taxes. Yeah. But that ends up coming down to 25% by 1925. But then again, in World War II, you end up getting a huge spike in taxes. It's a progressive rate, but people are paying really exorbitant taxes. 1932 to 1936, you've got the Great Depression, tax increase. This is part of Hoover's New Deal. We've got to pay for all of this stuff. Now, there's a whole debate about whether by leaving the income taxes as high as we did during the Great Depression, that we actually elongated that. That's beyond the scope of today's episode. But at one point, they actually... there was a Revenue Act of 1935 that was sometimes called the Soak the Rich Act, because it imposed a top marginal income tax rate of 79% on the highest incomes during a period of peace. So it's like, that is very high. Again, known as there was a dip known as the Roosevelt recession in the late 1930s that people debate whether, if they had brought down the taxes sooner, if we would have gone through that. So something there. 1940 to 1945, World War II, they call it going from class tax to mass tax. So this is where it was like, hey, we're really just trying to tax the wealthy to get us through these times of trouble. But now in World War II, there's a growing sense that everybody would be willing to contribute to the war effort. So we start taxing everybody. So obviously the wealthy are getting taxed at a much higher rate, but now everybody's getting taxed, and down to like $500 being your annual income, and anything above that is being taxed. Now, the exact inflation adjusted dollars, I don't know, but it's going to be a pretty low number. But yeah, the top level during this period, was in the 90s. I don't see it here in my notes, but it was very, very high. And so after the war, then we start talking about really starting to bring these down. By 1964, the Kennedy-Johnson tax cut gets proposed while Kennedy's still alive. Johnson ends up being the one that actually pushes it through after the assassination. But yeah, cutting the top marginal tax rate from 91%, which was a leftover from World War II and the Korean War levels, down to 70%. And lowering the bottom tax rate from 20% to 14%. It also cut the corporate tax rate slightly from 52% to 48%. And then all of those tax cuts were phased in from 64 to 65 and amounted to roughly a 20% across the board reduction in tax liabilities. So it's a lot more complicated than what he's saying. To some degree, you've got to simplify this stuff to make it understandable. I like the interpretation. I think the data is there for it, but it is an interpretation of, hey, this was all about letting people rebuild. And I think it's actually pretty brilliant to use that to partly export the power of the United States economy to these countries that were hoping through the Marshall Plan to make them allies, to help them rebuild. Fantastic. Yeah. But I don't know that we know what is going to happen to the economy as we try to re-normalize trade. But there's a reason that Trump has been banging on about this since like the 80s, saying basically this trade imbalance is crazy. For people that don't know, GDP, gross domestic product, the way that you calculate that is what you export minus what you import. So all the things you're paying another country to buy their goods and services, subtracted from the number that you export, and we're in the negative. So with some countries. So we're actually in, and people have certainly heard Trump use this word, in a trade deficit where we pay other countries more for their stuff than they pay for ours, partly because we're letting them tariff the life out of our goods. Take Japan, it's easy. We dropped a bomb on you. We absolutely destroyed your economy. If we want to see you rebuild, then we want to make sure that you're able to sell into what was the undisputed heavyweight champion of economies at that time, which is the US market. So we're going to have low tariffs versus the high tariffs that you're going to put on us so that we're not selling our goods into your country. So it gives you the opportunity to rebuild. And this is the part, given that we're in a Cold War with China, that I really think people need to look at and ask themselves the question, how do we bring some manufacturing back to the US? And again, we're not trying to manufacture everything, but if we can find a sensible way, and there's a certain amount of chaos. I love hearing Lutnick talk about it because he makes it clear and it sounds so controlled and lovely. But we do need to find a way to incentivize bringing that manufacturing back. And when I look at what we did with Japan or other countries, it's the exact playbook, but in reverse. You keep your tariffs high, you keep your tariffs against us high, and we'll keep our tariffs against you low. That way you can sell into us, but we'd have a hard time selling into you. And so he's basically flipping that and saying, at a minimum, we're going to be balanced, but in some industries, we're going to be aggressive.
So what I'm gleaming from both the history of income tax and tying that with the tariffs is there was a historical precedent for going in this direction and treating the economy in this way. And I think you're saying it's better if we move toward that to just get a better balance, not necessarily saying that this should directly replace income taxes or we should stop taxing people. Like, is there a balance between tariffs and income tax, or once we get tariffs 100% rolling, we can then
he's going to explain it, so I'll let him talk about it. But to set it up, the gist goes something like this. If we can reduce $1 trillion in spending and can make $1 trillion from tariffs and the Trump gold card, that now we're in a really great position. And then if we can monetize America's assets, whether it's minerals, oil and natural gas, lumber, whatever, like all the things that we have that are on America's balance sheet, then we can put ourselves in a position where we don't need to do the income tax, certainly not the way that we're doing it now. And I actually don't understand people's emotional response to like clowning on the idea of income tax versus, the Internal Revenue Service versus External Revenue Service. And I would ask people, run a thought experiment. If we could do it, and because it's very possible that what Trump and Lutnick are doing ends up just being too hard, complicated, and it tanks our economy. That's very possible, and everyone needs to be eyes wide open. But run the thought experiment. If this could be done well, and we could make enough money off of other countries wanting to sell into our economy, that we did not need to tax people's income inside this country, and we gained it all through, call it a membership fee. Just again, this is just a thought experiment. Would you not be excited? Would that not be awesome? So I would love to hear people's pushback on it, because if I were to step into it and steel man it, the only thing I could see is if people were like, there's the allyship that you have with people by allowing them to sell into the economy, that goes away and you're just weakening alliances. That could be that there could be second and third order consequences along those lines that play out negatively. But if you run the thought experiment, you say, okay, if that worked, I would love it, then cool, I understand. And now we're just arguing about where the rubber meets the road. I just don't think, Tom, that it's actually going to play out that way. Okay, cool. Now at least we have the same value set where we would love to be in a position where we don't have to tax our own people. But if this is like an emotional thing of like, fuck the rich, I want their money. Now I'm like, okay, hold on. That play doesn't feel good to me. That's something totally separate, which is why I love that these guys are at least saying, listen, our goal is to get to the point where we don't have to charge income tax on people making $150,000 or less. If they pull that off, it's a big if, but if they pull that off, Trump will be remembered positively for sure. Oh my God.
Well, let me give you the economist's counter, and then you can respond to it, which is tariffs on imports in the United States will ultimately pass to the consumer higher prices, inflationary. So the things that our consumers, that our citizens are buying gets more expensive. And as a result, they buy less. And it's recessionary. It shrinks the economy, it shrinks spending, it shrinks consumption. Can you kind of respond to that's the typical economist refrain on this, independent, and maybe they're isolating the imbalance?
Okay. India has a 50% tariff on average. 50. We have on average 4. Okay? I would say to the person who said that, can I ask you a question? What are you talking about? They're 50 and 4. Well, here's what you're talking about. When we're all equal and everything is free and fair, if you raise tariffs and they raise tariffs, isn't it bad for society? The answer is, of course it is. But there's 2 differences. Number 1, let's do human beings first.
So I actually really like where he's about to go. And it is humans matter. You hollow out the lower middle class by getting rid of manufacturing. And don't we need to think about those people? And I will ask people, as gung-ho as I am about AI, I will ask people to remember the same thing, because we are about to go through this super tumultuous period where, because he's going to talk about deaths of despair, rightly so. AI is going to exacerbate that. And so this is one of those things where, man, there's no stopping it. But when we do things like globalism, AI, whatever the case may be, there's going to be a human toll that has to be part of the calculus. Yeah. So anyway, I just want people thinking about AI as well when they hear these words.
Bill Clinton signs the North American Free Trade Agreement, or corporations, you can screw Americans and go get cheap labor in Mexico and break the unions by going to Canada. Now, if you were General Motors, I'd say, it's like my birthday.
Yeah.
If I take my production and move it to Mexico, it's better for me, Mr. Corporation. Okay? But it's not better for me, Mr. US citizen of the United States of America who's working at a car plant. That's bad news for him. Okay? And that's number 1. And now let's go to number 2, which is the math of it all. If we say free and fair trade, I want to remind you, there ain't no such thing. There is no country in this world that is free trade. 0. And we are the lowest and the dumbest because everybody else is higher and more protective.
Yeah.
So they protect their farmers. Here, I'm sitting at the dinner Modi comes to town. And I say to him, when Donald Trump, we have dinner, and after the niceties, Donald said, go ahead, Howard. And I said, you have 1.4 billion people. And you brag to us how amazing your economy is. Why won't you buy a bushel of our corn? You won't buy a bushel of our corn. So our farmers can't go to him, but his, of course, can come at us, right? Why is that okay? You know, and we can go into all the stuff that, I don't even want to go into it because if I had another hour, I could regale you with stories that are fun with that. But
just address the pricing inflation that arises from tariffs. Talk to the average person who says the cost of a toy at Walmart just went up by 50%.
Okay. Inflation comes from printing more money.
Preach.
Okay. Let's say the United States of America had $1 trillion. That's all we had. That's it. No more. Okay. And I want to buy a bottle of water and you want to buy a bottle of water. One came from America and the other one came from Fiji, right? And I tariff Fiji. Then that water is $1.25 and this water is $1. That's not inflation. That means that one's more expensive. But I can choose to buy this one.
Right.
Okay? So you're right. This toy might be more expensive and that toy's not. I get it. But that's not inflation. Here's inflation. Snap my fingers, now we have $2 trillion. Right? That water's $1.50, that water's $1.25. Yeah, everything's more expensive.
That's inflation.
This is that one. If I could get people to understand, inflation is not higher prices. Inflation is the increase in the money supply. Mm-hmm. It's an increase in the money supply that causes a rise in the prices across the board because the dollar is becoming worth less. Getting that one's just nuanced enough that people just cannot interface with it. Tariffs will selectively make some things more important. Now, he's about to cover the thing that I hope everybody's asking themselves, well, wait a second, what if you're tariffing something? The only way I can get it is from Fiji. He's about to talk about it.
Without tariffs is everything's $1.25.
Now, what
inflation with tariffs is $1.25, right? And $1.50. And so you have to understand inflation doesn't come from tariffs. Certain products, if I put a tariff on a mango, right? We can't grow mangoes in America. We just can't grow a mango. If you put a tariff on a mango, the mango would be more expensive.
Yes.
Okay? But if the president chose to put a tariff on a mango, then the mango is more expensive. That just becomes a consumption tax. It's like a sales tax.
Yes.
Right? It's a sales tax. It's a consumption tax. If I want to buy a mango, it costs more money.
And you can offset that with a reduction in income tax.
I just want to give flowers to David Friedberg. Like, he has this so dialed in. Mm-hmm. He knows exactly the pain points. Because if you say mangoes are going to be more expensive and all the things like mangoes that you just can't get in the US, so that price is going to go up. But commensurate with that, I tax you less. Now you get to decide, do you want to save that money or do you want to pay extra for the mango? But you're put in the driver's seat. And this is where I don't understand people's reaction to, I don't want to be in the driver's seat. I want you, dear government, to make that decision for me. That's so weird. Now, if you tax it and you drive the price up and don't give me a tax break, that I get why people would have beef with. So that's why, like, this is going to come out in the wash. If these guys can't drive the cost down from an income tax perspective, but they're driving the cost up of the goods with all the different tariffs and stuff, then we're going to be in trouble.
But the idea is to not do that.
Yeah.
That's the idea. The idea is to choose things that are going to reshore.
Yeah, exactly.
Come here.
This is so important.
Hire my people.
Yeah.
Bring it home.
Yeah.
Right?
And by the way, I want to just speak as an entrepreneur. I see the economic incentive. When I see the price for certain things go higher because you have to import and pay a tariff, I'm like, why don't we make that here? We should be doing that. And there's going to be a lot of that kind of entrepreneurial opportunity that will arise from making things. And this is just how the markets work. Someone will say...
$2 trillion so far. I mean, he's been in office, right? Like 7 weeks, 8 weeks?
Yeah.
$2 trillion of committed domestic production coming back because of his tariffs.
This is one of those, he's Lutnick, man, would I ever want him on my team? Like, this guy represents Trump's policies 1,000 times better than Trump does. And unfortunately, Trump's may be the more accurate assessment of what's really going on. Lutnick makes it sound like, no, this really is the Tesseract chess that Tom keeps swearing just can't be happening. It will need time to play out for us to see if this is actually going to work. But I am deeply comforted by the fact that at least Lutnick has he looks up in the sky and he shows me the constellation of dots. Whereas when Trump talks about it, I just see fucking dots and they seem chaotic as hell. So that is very encouraging. Knowing that people in the stock market are listening to this, I hope that this begins to calm some of the sentiment that we see knocking at the prices of stocks. Now, if it actually does just in reality play out poorly and it takes so long for people to onshore or friendshore, and this just ends up being terrible for the economy, prices are going up everywhere, the consumer's stymied, we're in a stealth recession, the stealth recession becomes too obvious to ignore, they're playing a game of chicken, and it is very possible that we get in the head-on collision before we're able to reap the benefits of this stuff. But the dots, as he's laying them out, connect so well. It really does feel like there's at least a shot that this stuff plays out well. And given that, when I look at it and I'm like, the only thing that makes no sense is making no change, because the status quo is so horrifying to the poor and middle class. Morally, you can't keep doing it. Now, I've said this 1,000 times, but hopefully what people know I mean when I say that, you cannot keep printing money, which means you absolutely have to balance the budget.
It's from that perspective, it does make a lot more sense than the average headline that I think a lot of voters have seen in the last couple of weeks. So
listen, in the average voter's defense, Trump talks like a maniac. Yeah. And so he's playing hokey pokey tariffs. I get it, create chaos, negotiating, blah, blah, blah. But you're living in a world where all of this stuff is happening in the open. And the fact that it's happening in the open causes the negotiation itself to change. And I don't think it's causing the negotiation itself to change for the better. I think that all of Trump's ideas were made in a time where this was all happening behind the scenes. And ironically, he has the impulse to do everything out in the open because he loves the adoration. Not even that, like he just loves the attention. I do a fucking live show. I want the attention. So I fully understand the impulse to be like, hey, America, let's do this together. It feels awesome. I feel engaged with you. Like, chat to me is what America is to Trump, right? Some people love me, some people hate me. They're all saying a thing, but it feels vital. It feels like we're really doing something here. And so I get the impulse, but at the same time, the other side is listening and they're like, okay, now we're just mapping what of this is manic. I know you're going to have to go back and tell your people what you're doing. There's going to need to be a certain amount of discrepancy between what you tell the public you're doing and what you're actually doing with me. Otherwise, I can map you perfectly and you're telegraphing every move. So that's the only thing I know isn't happening. The only thing I know isn't happening is it is a one-to-one what he says in public and then what he's doing privately, because it just won't work. So that's where it's all like, I don't know. Like, is he going to piss people off enough that we really do just burn our allies out? Are we going to confuse the stock market so much that they're just like, Jesus Christ, and sentiment drops because people are like, I can't make long-term plans. And without being able to make long-term plans, I cannot steer my public company. If I can't steer my public company well, I can't tell the investors what they need to hear to have a narrative to invest. So it is possible that this all spirals into madness, but that's at least a way to string the dots together that is coherent. And if it plays out that way, advantageous to the average American.
Okay, so this was probably my favorite headline yesterday. I was laughing at the memes. My finance background is starting to peek out. DoorDash and Klarna have signed a deal where customers can choose to pay for food deliveries in interest-free installments. There have been so many memes from The Big Short, from Hedge Fund, from all the stock movies. Somebody had Tony Soprano, who's going to be the head of DoorDash collection fees, repoed. But
this is my favorite one here. Born too late to buy a home, born too soon to explore space, born just in time to finance a pizza from Domino's. This is hilarious as a meme. I think the reality here, I don't think there's a big thing to be in a panic about. I think that there is a psychological principle at work here that they're tapping into, which is that it really does make things seem cheaper. I can afford to buy a computer, but when I go to buy something from Apple and they tell me, or you could do this for 47 payments of $87, I'm like, ooh, that actually sounds better. And then I'm like, what? Like, why would I do that? But even I have the impulse to be like, oh, cool, that's a lot cheaper. Now, it is also very possible that you buy something more than you could buy, or you buy something you're just fine with, but then when it comes due, you're not able to make the payment. And so now you get yourself in trouble because you're doing everything on credit and you're just not managing things well. And of course, the only reason this business model works is some people are going to pay the extra money. I want to live in a world that is, of course, not real, where only the people that can afford it are the people that, and oh, damn, whoops, I forgot to pay for it, but here, let me pay the fee and make up for it. It will not be that way. But this comes down to the dumb voter problem. So knowing that there are some people, they lack the self-awareness, they lack the money management skills, or they just outright lack the intellect to manage their money, should the government step in and say, no, you can't do that? And my answer is no. The government should allow people to run their lives the way within confines, but those should be very light touch confines. And this to me would be way overreach to say, no, we're not going to allow people to finance it if that's what they want to do. Because like I remember growing up, we could only eat out on payday. And so, I mean, what was payday? Every other week. So it was like every other week we could get delivery pizza or go out to Charlie's Pizza. Shout out to Charlie's Pizza, which I have not thought about in a very long time. And if, for instance, let's say that my sister's birthday fell off-timed with that. And my dad was like, oh man, I completely forgot about that. And I want to do something nice for my daughter's birthday. And so if I can afford this. And if you give me a week, I'll be able to pay this. I wouldn't want somebody to go, no. I don't trust that you know how to manage your money. And then put my dad in a position where he has less options than he would otherwise have. You know me, everything. I think you can calibrate somebody's view of the entire political world by asking them, what do you do with people you, dear person that I'm speaking to, what do you think we should do with people you think are too dumb to think through these problems well? And if they say, yeah, they shouldn't be allowed to vote, or they shouldn't be allowed to do with their money what they want, that person is a tyrant. Perhaps a well-meaning tyrant, but a tyrant nonetheless. And that for me is the trigger that I freak out and derail on.
Yeah, I'm just here for the memes. So
He's been going off on these memes literally all day. I would look over at him and he'll just be laughing. I'm like, what's up now? And he's like, oh yeah, it's just more memes. More memes around the mortgage-backed burritos.
The mortgage-backed burritos. Things that U.S. no longer has, a Department of Education. Thing the U.S. now has, finance Doordash burritos.
There it is. There it is.
That's all I got. So
Truth and memes.
Yeah, there is the underlying, some people are laughing about it. Some people are, to your point, are saying it could just be bad payday. DoorDash also has groceries. There's household essentials. So single moms who might be off on an off week, they can now break it up and buy it. So there are ways that I can justify this business plan. However, with the economy in a recession-like mood, people are a little bit nervous about the stock market. Do you think that this is an indicator of a much larger problem, or do you just think it's a coincidence that this is now gaining this much attention, and the fact that our economy is in its current state, it just kind of overlapped and happened?
Well, I think the reality is that people's money is being inflated away. So there's no doubt people are taking a step down every day. So to say that it's completely coincidental would be foolish. We are inflating people's money into oblivion. Do I think that this is an option that's being put on the table precisely because we are having a recession? No, I think that this is something where people see a business opportunity to give people maximum choice. People either live in a world where they're prepared to spend more than they're earning or not. But the thing that is really damaging people is not the stock market, because 50% of the United States does not own assets, and it is people on the lower side of the spectrum. So the very people that can't afford what some people would call the basics are the people that don't have assets. And so whatever bad thing is going on in the asset market has nothing to do with them. Where they are getting their heads caved in is with inflation.
Yeah. Well, somebody else who might be feeling it, Village Roadshow, the legendary studio house, has filed for Chapter 11 protections, and producer Patrick talks about it.
Our boy.
Week as an iconic studio collapses under bankruptcy. I am producer Patrick, bringing you the latest in the ever-evolving film and television industry. Village Roadshow, which has produced over 89 title films like Joker, the Matrix series, and the Lego Movie, filed Chapter 11 protection in a Delaware court yesterday, according to The Hollywood Reporter. The writing was apparently on the wall after multiple rounds of layoffs and its CEO stepping down in January. And at the end of last year, the WGA issued a stop working order after Village Roadshow refused to pay its writers and was long overdue on unpaid contracts. And this wasn't the failure of any one movie. The bankruptcy stems from a 3-year lawsuit against its long-standing former partner Warner Brothers Discovery. Village Roadshow once held a prolific co-production, co-financing, and co-ownership with Warner Brothers until 2022. That's when it claimed Warner Brothers released Matrix Resurrections on Max, the same day as its theatrical release. Village Roadshow said in a lawsuit that Warner Brothers denied the company its cut in the profits in favor of its new streaming platform. And things only escalated from there, and has so far racked up about $18 million in unpaid legal bills. Ouch. Warner Brothers currently has its own financial problems, currently sitting at about $40 billion in debt. But to put this in much simpler terms, Village Roadshow feels like it can no longer continue doing business without its relationship with Warner Brothers, and therefore has to close its doors.
That is absolutely brutal. We're going to keep seeing this play out in Hollywood. The reality is that the entertainment industry has changed so dramatically. It is very hard for people to spend all the money that it takes to make these things and make enough money given the streaming landscape, given the fact that people don't go to movie theaters nearly as much as they used to. All of that's just changing the dynamic of this. And look, this is my first love. Film is what I thought I was going to spend my life on. I just could not have been more passionate about filmmaking up through, call it, the early 2000s. So, man, nobody is more sad that the world changes than me. But the reality is industries come and go. And it's hard to watch an industry that's, 130 plus years old go away. But this is just how it goes. And much like I don't think you want the government bailing out the economy every 2 steps because it creates distortions, bubbles, robs from the poor, gives to the rich. You don't want them you don't want anybody trying to save something that the marketplace is saying, this isn't what we want anymore. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Tesla. Somebody in the live, I don't know, thought that I was going to be weird about the price of Teslas going down. If people don't want to buy Teslas because they don't like Elon Musk's politics, that's their right. Nobody should force them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if people are going to vote with their dollars and go buy another car, cool. And Elon either performs and builds a car that's so undeniable that even though you hate him and you're so mad that you still want to drive it, that's the game. And if people like me who used to go, I would see 3 movies in a day by myself, I loved it that much. If people like me are like, nah, I have a movie theater in my house, I don't even watch that many movies. So it just shifts. The mojo now is in series. And then let's complicate all of this because most of this stuff is going to go away with AI. That I think it's really within 3 years, you're going to be able to prompt your way, certainly to an animated film, probably a photorealistic film. If I'm wrong on the timeline, it's for sure in the next 10 years, unless AI hits an upper bound of intelligence, which I don't expect. It just all goes away. It is what it is. All of us are going to be sad. Kids won't even know that there was ever this thing. They won't think about it. They won't care about it. It won't matter. So going back to Deaths of Despair, I care about the humanity of it all, but this is the nature of life. Nothing stands still forever. We all grow up thinking whatever we grew up with is forever, and none of it's forever.
I'm revisiting my childhood right now because I'm seeing movies like Miss Congeniality, Ocean's 11, The Matrix,
Village
Analyze
Roadshow
This, Analyze That,
awesome.
Swordfish. There's so this is not a bunch of indie Oscar bait movies that only 6 people with berets watch. This is mass appeal things that you would recognize. So it's very sad. It's very sad.
And I think Village Roadshow has been around since the 80s or 90s. I could be making that up, but I'm pretty sure they've been, 90s for sure, because they did The Matrix.
Yeah. 90s.
Yeah, they are an incredible company with a long legacy. And unfortunately, basically every company ever dies. Mm. It's just a question of when. And that makes me, when I think about that, I think about impact theory is not going to last forever, obviously. Mm-hmm. So it's sad. That means that there's going to be one day, my lifetime, or if there's a successor, where it's just dead, doesn't matter anymore, completely irrelevant. When I think about, for my parents' generation, Elvis was the biggest thing ever. For my generation, it was we knew about Elvis being the biggest thing ever, even though none of us really cared about him. Kids today don't know who Elvis is. Yeah. They may or may not have even heard those syllables strung together. So it's just, this is the way it goes. And so a mindset PSA to everybody: do not value yourself for accomplishment. Do not value yourself for what other people think about you. You want to say, this is how I think a human ought to behave, and then behave that way, earn your own respect. Everything else is transient.
Man. Well, something that was popular when I was a kid and is still popular now is Pokemon cards, and people are still holding it down. This is a video from a rush that happened at Costco. because they just dropped a new pack. I think the shiny pack just dropped for the Pokemon cards. So yeah, it's literally a stampede. There's like those old Black Friday videos.
Yeah, this is crazy. This is unfortunately not about Pokemon. This is about people being able to flip things for money. Now, this might be more about the recession, where people see an easy opportunity to make money. If I can be the first one in the door, then I can sell these on Name Your App, and I can make a profit. So, I mean, listen, it's ugly and I don't like to see it, but meaning there's just something about it that feels grabby and sweaty. I don't know how else to explain it, but I'm glad that economic opportunities exist. People are able to identify them and take advantage of it. But as an IP creator, this is the thing that makes me die inside, because I want to make things for people that want to own it. And all of the people running, I'm going to guess none of them care about owning it, which is why they're not grabbing a pack. They're grabbing every pack that they can fit in their hands before somebody else knocks them out of the way and takes it, because they're all trying to flip it. And the bad news is, having lived through the comics gold rush when Image launched as an imprint, that you end up actually destroying the brand because everybody thinks that there's going to be somebody else to sell to. And the reality is, all the people buying it are people that want to sell it to somebody else. And eventually there's nobody that just wants to have the thing. Now, I don't pay enough attention to Pokemon, but given how long they've lasted, it's very possible that they're just really tight with inventory. And they know this is not about the people trying to flip. This is about the holder. And so they really do keep numbers tight. Again, I don't know. So they could be about to tank their brand, or they could really have lasted as long as they've lasted by going, we only make things for the person that holds. Now, if they're doing that, awesome. Because, dude, I am wired to be a collector. I have thousands of comics. I've never sold a single comic ever. I don't plan to. It's not like I buy it because I think that they're going to have value. I buy it because just off camera on the other side of this curtain is my manga room, where I've got hundreds of volumes of manga. And simply seeing them on the shelf makes me feel good. I had hundreds, if not more than 1,000 Blu-ray DVDs. And I was very sad when the day came where I was like, I just don't watch the DVDs anymore. I only watch the virtual assets. So yeah, I wish we lived in a world where people love to collect the way that I did, that the IP just really sits inside their soul, and having some representation of it is the thing that drives them. But I find that way more people are driven by the gamble of it all, the economics, the flip. Yeah. So anyway, if you're an entrepreneur, be careful out there. Never make so much, Beanie Babies, that you're feeding the flippers. You want to think exclusively about the collectors. It's just such a different game.
That's why I went Nike. That's why they're tanking sneaker culture. Oof. Sneaker culture was so good. People used to line up because they wanted the sneakers, and it became the people that actually wore the sneakers and valued them couldn't get them. So you just have a bunch of sneaker listings on StockX and all these other platforms that have built a business on being a reseller. Yeah. So something will drop on Foot Locker. The bots will snatch them up, put them right on StockX. It dropped at 8 o'clock for $200. It's on StockX at 8:30 for $300. And it's just... Yeah. Over and over and over, and then you just kill your actual base that cared, and then now you have a bunch of people who have boxes of inventory and nobody to sell it to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, ultimately, as a video game developer that builds on the back of Web3, this is something that we have to figure out a way to solve. I think the solution is you have to find a way to reward the people that engage with your thing. So it's like, what's the behavior that I want to reward? But how you do that with shoes is a lot harder. In game, I can see how much time you spend in game. So it's like you qualify for this limited edition thing because of the amount of time that you spent in game. But when it's sneakers, man, all you know is you bought the shoes last time, but you could have bought them last time to flip them. And so it becomes a totally different game.
It was like this whole weird thing.
Yeah, so it's tough, man, but that is the marketplace. And so there are good sides and there are bad sides. And you know me, I'm not regulate your way out of this. So what's going to happen is going to happen. If Nike loses their grip on culture because they're not handling it well, somebody will come along that handles it well, and they'll be the ones that win. And that's how the market should work.
And we're seeing that already, because I've never seen this many diverse brands of sneakers happening.
That's so true.
Yeah, it used to be 3 brands. Now it's 17. All right. And last but not least, I want to see somebody's soul leave their body. This is crazy. This is Alec Baldwin on the red carpet with his wife on the premiere of one of her TV shows, I believe it is. And how she was talking to him and then his face in response, you could just literally see like it. I feel like they talked about this in the car. This is one of those moments.
Oh, guaranteed. Because she ended up clapping back at people saying something about it. She doubled down on this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She called it man-terrupting, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to see this.
Let him play.
No, I think we're gonna see. We're gonna see how it feels to have it be out there.
It's gonna be great. You're a winner.
Oh my God! When I'm talking, you're not talking. No, when I'm talking, you're not talking. This is why. Yes, we'll have to just cut him out of the show. No, I mean, I think this is a really.
God, look at him. Look at him.
And then he moves. That's how you know it was real. Like,
and we took a lot of chances. And I think that we'll see where it leads us. We'll see what it feels like to have.
That hurts. Oh God. Yeah. I am sure that they talked about that in the car. No doubt. Especially because he was trying to compliment her. Now listen, he's famous. He's used to the attention being on him. So look, I just hate everything about that exchange. Given that he's trying to big her up and then she's like cutting him off and we're going to have to cut him out of frame. Oh man, that one makes me sad. Now I have no idea what he's like. He is certainly not, he did the whole thing where he was telling his daughter she's fat or something on a private phone call. I'm pretty sure that was him. So this is not somebody who I think off camera is a beacon of joy in handling things well, but still that one was rough.
I'm trying to look at the feedback. I think we're going to see how it feels to be out there. Okay. I'm trying to see where's the man interrupting.
There it is, right? Literally right there. You just scrolled past it. Man interrupting right there. And that's called what? And that is called, what's the word of the day? She asks her husband, who replies, man interrupting. Now, I don't know who was actually having that conversation, if it was them or not, but.
The couple went on Instagram. Oh, here we go.
Winner.
Oh my God, when I'm talking, you're not talking. No, when I'm talking, you're not talking. This is why, yes, we'll have to just cut him out of the show.
So they're making fun of it.
And that is called, what's the word of the day?
Man-terrupting.
Man-terrupting, which could be a positive, it could be a negative, or it could be a...
Correctile dysfunction.
Yes, correctile dysfunction.
That's pretty funny.
One of our children trying to get into
correctile dysfunction, I'll admit, that's pretty funny.
But the whole point is because our children...
Here's the thing, boys and girls. This is where rules of engagement matter. So I won't reveal what it was, but when Lisa and I film together, we have nonverbal cues that we have practiced giving each other so we know what it means. I would highly encourage spouses, significant others, whatever, to do something similar so that if I were doing something on a red carpet and Lisa didn't like it, she knows how to cue me, and then I stop. And so she allows me to be graceful and stop doing whatever thing that I don't realize I'm doing. And she doesn't have to look horrible doing something like that. So clearly, she wanted that moment to be about her. It was rubbing her the wrong way. You give nonverbal cue, he backs off. Let people do memes about there was clearly she said something that he knew to stop. Cool, whatever. That's way better than that, which is bitchy. And then also, personally, as funny as correctile dysfunction is,
it seems emasculating.
The meme, it's emasculating, Drew. I'm not a fan. This is not making me think better of Alec Baldwin or her for that matter.
Yeah.
So make each other look and feel better. That is, I think, very smart. Now, look, Lisa and I disagree with each other on camera. So it is a fine line. And I'm sure that there are memes that you could pull of me overstepping. There's no doubt. I just get it. But Lisa and I, when we're off camera, are like, hey, I didn't like that. Here's how I would prefer you handle it in the future. And we try to get better so that every time we're engaging with each other privately or publicly, that we're listening to the other person, understand how we can do things in a way that feels right for us, and that they would receive and appreciate and be like, cool, that if she has a way that she wants him to cheer her on, articulate that and then have him do it. That would be my advice to couples that want to last.
Celebrities, just like us, women problems. Am I right?
There it is, Drew.
That's all I
Nice. All right. If you haven't already, everybody, make sure that you subscribe. And if you're listening to this on the podcast and you love it, make sure that you go give us a 5-star review. It really does help. All right, everybody. Until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. Here is the brutal truth about scaling. Most entrepreneurs don't outright fail, they plateau. And if you're stuck right now, you know how true that is. It could be that your revenue flatlines every time you step away, or maybe you're trapped in a commodity market that's racing to the bottom, or maybe you're one of the lucky people who is navigating a very complex partner dynamic that turns every decision into a battle. These problems and a whole lot more can seem impossible until you break them all down into first principles. My partners and I used this thinking to grow Quest Nutrition by 57,000% in our first 3 years alone and scaled to $1 billion exit. And now I'm teaching this framework to a select group of entrepreneurs who are ready to scale. Now, I want to be clear, this is not for everybody because I'm looking to work with serious entrepreneurs that already have an established business and a proven track record of execution. If that's you and you want to learn how to break through your biggest business bottlenecks using first principles thinking, be sure to apply now. Just go to impacttheory.com/scale or click the link in the show notes. Again, that's impacttheory.com/scale. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more. Revolutionary breakthrough in cancer treatments turns tumors into pork. You heard that correct. The JFK files drop and the CIA headquarters go on lockdown. CBDCs are coming to Europe in 2025. Get out while you can. Senator Schumer mocks